Hey, Adam here and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be having an extensive look at the disappearance of Casey Hathaway, which was requested by Magnus Zetterqvist, and this was a very unusual one. It was then made even stranger when he was found, because he started to say some very questionable and interesting things about spending time with a bear in the woods. I then spent some time looking through older newspapers, and to my surprise this isn't the first time something weird like this has been reported, so with that being said, let's get into it. So Casey Hathaway was 3 years old when he disappeared from the Ernle area of Craven County. Chip Hughes, who was the Craven County Sheriff, he said that Casey disappeared at 1:45 PM on the 22nd of January 2019. He said that Casey was last seen playing with two other children in his grandmother's backyard. It was then realised that something was wrong when the other two kids came back inside without Casey. Casey's grandmother and others present searched the area for Casey, but there was absolutely no sign of him at all. So whatever happened here happened quickly, and this makeshift search effort ended in failure and went on for around 45 minutes before they made the call to the authorities to report him missing. So let's have a listen to the call.
Okay, and what's going on there?
We lost my 2-year-old grandson that has walked in the woods back there and we can't find him. 3-year-old grandson.
Okay, so who's there with them?
His little sister.
You said he's 3-year-old?
Yeah, he's 3.
Okay.
The girls come to the house and left him there, and he's walked off somewhere, and we can't find him.
Okay, but you're not there at the house now?
I'm at the house, yeah.
Now, to be fair, the authorities took that very seriously, and they pretty much immediately had boots on the ground in the area searching for Casey. And by nightfall, they had well over 100 searches in the area. Chip said that there was so many people flocking to the scene that they couldn't organise them quick enough, and they even had to turn some away because the search was going to start turning messy and quickly. The State Bureau of Investigation then got involved, and it also seems that something interested the FBI here too, because Chip said that they wanted to be involved, and they then sent down people to assist. So this is the general area that we're interested in, and as you can see, it's a pretty rural and remote area. There's a lot of woodland in almost every direction, and Tola Road is where the authorities set up their command post. WITN News reported that the boy apparently went back into thick woods behind the home, but they didn't actually elaborate on why they believe that was the case. You know, it's not clear if someone saw him do that or if it was just an assumption. We don't know. Despite there being at least some kind of search effort right away from the moment Casey went missing, he wasn't found that night. On the 23rd, there was a discussion that took place on the temperatures overnight, and to be honest, it was a pretty bleak picture. Temperatures were thought to be in the mid and low 30s Fahrenheit, which is anywhere from freezing to around 2 degrees Celsius. So Casey's grandmother stated that he was not dressed for those kinds of conditions, and the authorities were very concerned about this. The sheriff's office started to ask people to check the properties just in case Casey, had wandered inside looking for some warmth. It also seems that on the 23rd, the FBI arrived on scene, but they didn't come alone. With them came a dispatchment of US Marine Corps who entered the woods alongside those already present. Again, this search went on all day, and by 9:30 PM, they still had not located Casey. And it's just worth mentioning now that Casey was around 2 foot 3 inches tall and weighed around 25 pounds, so this is a really small child. When he disappeared, he was wearing a blue coat, dark coloured trousers and his shoes. And the concern was obviously pressing now because it was set to be around freezing again overnight. And because of that, the search effort was planned to continue over the entirety of that night. So Chip indicated that they weren't going to rule out any possibilities here, including the idea that a third party had taken Casey. However, the FBI spokeswoman on scene, Shelley Lynch, seemed to rein him in a bit here and said that there was absolutely no reason to believe that the toddler hadn't just walked away and become lost. The family stated that would have been completely out of character for him. From reading this, it does appear that two camps were forming, or at least the suspicion that Casey had been taken was certainly brewing at the very least. The good news was that the search had been massively upscaled and quickly too. At some point on the 23rd, searchers and volunteers came out in force, and there were around 600 people in the woods. The bad news was that it was reported that overnight temperatures had been even colder than previously thought. So if you remember, it was reported that temperatures were going to be in mid to low 30s Fahrenheit. WITN News reported that it was actually below freezing for 11 hours overnight, with the worst being 24.4 degrees Fahrenheit at 1:30 AM. And that's below -4 degrees Celsius for those of us who monitor the temperature correctly. So Chip also said that he had people out in knee to waist-high water checking out the nearby ponds, and that a dive team was on standby ready to enter the deeper areas. He then confirmed that the incident was still being treated as a missing child search rather than anything more sinister. It was also revealed that the other children with Casey at the time were around 5 years old, and that Casey was wandering into the woods was based on an assumption rather than any eyewitness account. So I was wondering if the other two kids present had told the grandmother that he'd wandered off, but it seems as though he disappeared right after they came inside, rather than before. This wasn't just a ground search either, but they had thermal imaging equipped aircraft, both planes and helicopters flying overhead with professionally trained search dogs on the ground, who at no point found Casey's scent. So this hadn't been mentioned yet, surprisingly, but it wasn't just freezing cold during this time, it was also raining a lot. And I assume that they meant that when they said that the weather took a turn for the worse. And this is bad because while the cold itself can cause someone to enter hypothermia, and that would happen to someone as small as Casey very quickly, being cold and wet is far worse as that speeds up the process of hypothermia significantly, and especially so if there's wind present. And I've just had a quick read as well, and there was actually wind present. Here's the quote. The Craven County Sheriff says they have shifted efforts to professionally trained search teams for Casey Hathaway, turning away most volunteers because of the heavy rain and strong winds. The 3-year-old has now been missing for more than 3 days. Sheriff Chip Hughes said that they have covered up to 1,000 acres of heavily wooded area that has sinkholes and several bodies of water. He also said that to date alone they have searched around 220 acres. I did just want to say as well that many of the searchers themselves were not expecting to find Casey in good condition. Petty Turner, who was one of the volunteers, said that for a grown man it would have been pretty tough out here for this long, but the Lord works in mysterious ways, and I hope he is working today. Another volunteer called Donna Harris said we went through the woods, through the thicket and the briars. We did it for 4 hours and it was bad. It was really bad out there. If everybody could come and help look for him, it would help. As it got darker, it was scary out there. I just can't imagine a 3-year-old being out there alone. The searchers were being absolutely battered by the harsh weather as well. But as ABC News reported at 4 PM on the 24th, searchers are pushing through heavy rain and whipping winds in the hunt for a missing 3-year-old boy in coastal North Carolina. We start to get into bizarre territory now as well. As reported by CBS News at 10:34 PM, authorities in Ernle, North Carolina said that they have located a boy in good health who was reported missing since Tuesday. Professional search and rescue crews near Caton found Casey, FBI spokeswoman Shelley Lynch said. Chip then said, "It's a stressful time for the family and everybody involved. But I can tell you, we are certainly doing our due diligence, spending a lot of time with them and just sorting through all of the different stories." I can't speak on behalf of Chip obviously, but when going through these press reports, it really did look like he thought that something was up here. And you can see why too, Casey was found in good condition and not suffering from hypothermia despite being small, thin, dressed in light clothing and being out for 2 nights in temperatures that drop below -4 degrees Celsius. So ABC News then offered some more information. They said that Casey was located off Tola and Aurora roads. He is in good health, is talking, and he's been evaluated by doctors at Carolina East Medical Center. Police said that he was found in the woods 40 or 50 yards from the road, about a quarter of a mile away from where he went missing. Researchers said that he was cold but talking when he was found. The boy was found in a wooded location provided by a tip from a citizen as the search widened in the area. The sheriff's office described the area as dangerous. The terrain is treacherous. Areas are flooded and filled with sinkholes. Even the trained searchers are having trouble navigating safely. There were no signs that the boy had been taken by a third party, said Chip. Now, there was a very interesting press conference where we can glean a couple of key details from the brief discussion. So Shane Greer, who was the searcher who I believe found Casey, said that he had untangled him from some briars that he was hung up in. Sheriff Chip Hughes then stated that I had to go through a lot of water to get to him. And I actually almost cheered myself at this point because questions like this almost never get asked in these disappearances that we cover on the channel. I don't know the reporter's name, but he was at least switched on and he asked, "Did Casey indicate how he got in there by himself?" To which Chip replied, "No, he hasn't said a whole lot." And that's a brilliant question as well. You know, the area Casey was found was described as treacherous, and as Chip said, he had to wade through a lot of water before he got to Casey's location. It was also stated that Casey had to be untangled from some briars that he was hung up on, which the way that's put almost sounds like he was elevated a bit, but I can't say that with any degree of certainty at all. So, a good question is though, how did he manage to travel to a location that professional searchers were struggling to reach? Another pressing question might be, how on earth did this boy survive temperatures below -4 degrees Celsius with pouring rains and strong winds? Or, you know, at the very least, why didn't he have hypothermia? So ABC 13 News actually provides some more details on the tip that led to Casey's discovery. Chip said that someone thought that they heard a child crying in the woods. He also revealed that that had happened many times in different locations, but it never led to Casey's discovery, obviously apart from the final time it happened. I actually found that interesting and a little bit creepy too, if I'm honest. Were people just hearing things all over the place? It's odd that this would be reported multiple times by different people. What do you make of that? Right, so if we weren't there already, let's get bizarre. Here's a direct quote from Chip when a reporter asked him the question, how did he survive out there and stay safe? It seems that even the reporter was questioning the idea if Casey was really alone. Here's what he said. He didn't really get into how he was able to survive. He did say that he had a friend in the woods that was a bear that was with him for 2 days. So Chip then promptly moved on from that and started discussing other things, and the reporter didn't bother to ask any questions here. What? How about, are there many bears out at this time? Aren't most bears in hibernation? Do bears often behave this way? You know, don't get me wrong, I'd probably have to think for a while to be asking the right questions, but I wouldn't just say nothing. The conversation went on, and Chip then said he still had all of his clothes on, but he was absolutely soaked. To get to him, our rescuers had to wade through waist-high water. And that was interesting as well because Chip then acknowledged that Casey was not quite at waist height, and then the conversation teeters off onto another topic entirely. The press drive me absolutely nuts sometimes, so we had to wade through waist-high water and Casey is not quite at waist height are two conflicting statements here. I don't know how they just let that slide, to be honest. And I do know that the sheriff's answer would probably have been something along the lines of, we're not sure, but still, those questions should have been posed. How did Casey manage to get to his final position alone? The sheriff stated that Casey was soaked right through, and we had temperatures of below -4 degrees Celsius, so why was he only cold and not suffering from hypothermia? We need to know more about this bear too, because I highly doubt that he was there alone. Being as small and thin as Casey was is a massive deal because it makes it very difficult to explain away how he came out in such good condition from this kind of weather. He only had a few scratches and scrapes. So 6 ABC News point to some amount of skepticism when they stated, many questions remain unanswered, and Sheriff Hughes said that he doesn't believe Casey was in that area the whole time. Chip said, I think he moved around. Now, there's not a whole lot of elaboration, but here's a statement on the bear as reported by the New York Daily News. Casey's aunt, Brianna Hathaway, in a Facebook post said her nephew was healthy, smiling and talking. He said that he hung out with the bear for 2 days. God sent him a friend to keep him safe. God is good, miracles do happen. Here's another statement by the family. This little one was lost in the woods for days in the freezing temperatures, rain, dark nights and wind. He told us that his best friend the bear was with him to keep him safe. Thanks to God's mercy, he came home to us alive and well. Chip then reiterated again that Casey didn't say how he was able to survive, and the article ends with the authorities are still working to determine what exactly happened, but suspect Casey was moving around in the woods while they searched for him. So Shane Greer, who was the chap who found him, said something interesting. Somebody looked after him. That was God at work. Well, I certainly think that someone did look after him, or was at least with him. So in regards to the bear, the Boston Herald reported that similar to Casey's family, Casey had also reported the bear to law enforcement, who were still unsure how Casey remained mostly healthy in the woods for 2 days without food or water. So the Guardian then got in contact with Chris Servheen, who is considered an expert on bear behaviour and is a bear researcher from the University of Montana. So Chris said that this incident should not encourage people to seek out their own relationships with bears. Here's what Chris had to say in regards to a bear looking after Casey. I've never known such a thing to happen. Bears don't do that. Wild bears aren't friendly with people. I don't want to say he's not telling the truth. He obviously thinks he's seen things and maybe he's got a teddy bear at home. But I've seen no evidence anything like that has ever happened. Bears by and large are afraid of people no matter how big the person is. Bears that move towards people don't survive long, so they get selected out. The only reason it would go near the child would be predation, although black bears are very rarely predatory of humans, and obviously that didn't happen here. In a situation where a bear is raised by a human, they can become very tame just like a dog, but a wild bear is very different. I don't want to cast aspersions on the child, but I think the little boy had a fantasy. The bear wouldn't feel sorry for him thinking he's alone. That's ascribing human characteristics on wild animals, which is anthropomorphism. I can absolutely see what Chris is saying, and it does sound borderline fantastical, but I would remind you that we're talking about a very small child that somehow managed to survive temperatures of -4 degrees Celsius, whilst wet and in strong winds. Casey didn't even suffer from hypothermia. Obviously, Chris didn't address any of that, and it's easy to call it a fantasy, but this is a boy that came away from this basically unscathed. As mentioned in my previous video, a professional search and rescuer said that grown men go missing in conditions better than this, and don't even last the night. Yet there's Casey, who managed to wade through water higher than him and survived freezing temperatures for a prolonged period of time. What do you make of that? Am I just completely underestimating him here, or is that not just absolutely bizarre? I've just stopped for a moment here to have a little read about the temperatures, and I've actually been saying -4 Celsius. It actually dropped to below -6. I just don't for a moment believe that this boy was alone. Something kept him warm. So while researching this, I came across an article by ABC 12 News, though their website is named WCTI12.com. Perhaps I'm just missing something there. But they reported some odd statements made by Sheriff Hughes. Here's what was said. Some people want to know how a child could survive those frigid temperatures for 3 days, and some believe Casey wasn't lost, but instead taken and later placed in the woods. Sheriff Hughes said everybody's got a theory about what took place and how there is no way this child could have survived. It was by the grace of God that Casey survived. The notion that he was sitting in a house or a vehicle for 2 days and put out there a couple of hours before we found him is absolutely not true. His core temperature was very low. His fingers all had a bit of frostbite. A lot of what the medical experts were telling us was conducive to him being out in the elements for an extended period of time. The coldness, the wet, and just the terrain we were dealing with, this kid was looked after, make no mistake about it. I said right from the start that Chip knew something was up, and it just seemed as though he and the FBI agents at the scene were at odds with each other a little bit, just because they seemed to rein him in. Chip also said that there was no way he was taken and put in a house or vehicle and then dropped back off. So that latter statement seems to indicate that Chip may believe that someone or something was with him in the woods. Casey talks about a bear, and while I don't believe it was a bear, he was certainly with something. So what are the options here? Was it literally a bear? Was it someone dressed in some kind of fairy animal costume? Was it a massive dog? Or was it something else entirely? It's worth stating that other than some cuts and scrapes, Casey was basically fine. So if it was a person dressed up, what was the motive? If something traumatic had have happened here, there would have been clear evidence of that. Another interesting point was that in an interview, Casey told the press that he never once heard the searchers calling for him. So God knows where he was then, and that's basically everything I could find on Casey. there's not much of a conclusion to give other than I agree with Sheriff Hughes in the end, that I don't believe that he was alone. Now, I don't know what that means exactly, but there is no way that he survived without a source of warmth. The real question is, what was that source exactly? Now, I also went back in time a fair bit to find some other disappearances that were blamed on animals, and you might be surprised to learn that Casey's disappearance wasn't the only one of its kind. There was only a couple of reports on this incident we're about to talk about, so there's far fewer details than there was on Casey. But here's what the Harrisonburg Rockingham Register reported on the 26th of August, 1892. A little 3-year-old named Fleming, whose parents lived in northern Michigan, being missed one afternoon, her parents tracked her to some bushes in the field, about 40 rods from the house, at which point the child's tracks disappeared and those of a large bear were found leading into the woods. Now, obviously, there is a difference already here, because during Casey's disappearance, there were no tracks or anything, which I suppose might be a bit odd. Anyway, they continue. The horrified father, aided by neighbours, followed up the bear which had carried off the child as fast as possible. But night set in, and they were obliged to wait till morning when the pursuit was recommenced. In a short time, as the pursuers were passing a swampy spot, they heard the child's voice calling aloud. They rushed forward, hearing a splash in the water, and soon saw the child standing on a log stretching over a pond. The bear, the child said, was carrying her across the log and had just jumped into the water and swam away. The bear had not hurt the child in the least, but had been caressing in its manner, and had lain down at night with its arms around the little one, as if to shield her from harm. The bear had just lost her cub and seemed to wish to adopt the child in its place. I actually think that last statement about the bear losing its cub was an effort to make sense of the situation rather than that being absolute fact, since that would have been pretty difficult to prove, with any degree of certainty. Now, I do suppose in some ways that was kinda similar to Casey's disappearance. I can only assume that they were certain that they were bear tracks. It's interesting that the father nor any of the searchers had seen the bear, and only Fleming had. It's also interesting that this bear would take her to a remote location and leave her on a log in a pond, and then just take off without doing anything. Certainly odd. I then found another one, though this one was a bit different, though I think it's still worth bearing in mind, no pun intended. Here's what the Middletown Daily Argus reported on the 17th of July 1884. Quite a ripple of excitement was caused in Miles City by the action of a pet bear, the property of Charles Brown, a prominent auctioneer and merchant of the town. Mr. Brown captured a male bear about 2 years ago and had raised him so that he has become a pet among the members of his family. He usually kept the animal chained in his backyard, but today, by some unaccountable means, he broke his bonds and roamed at large through the streets. No damage was attempted to Bruin until he met a child, about 3 years old, who unsuspiciously walked up to the shaggy brute and playfully pulled on his mane, fondling the animal, believing him to be a large, good-natured dog. The bear, however, was not peaceably inclined, and seizing the child with his rough teeth, he started at a rapid pace for the foothills, dragging his unfortunate victim along with him. The news soon spread, and the whole town became aroused. Maxwell, the father of the little one, overcome with horror at the danger hovering over the child, started in pursuit, armed. He soon overtook the savage monster, who still maintained its grip on its prey, and without danger to his offspring, he put the bear down. As said, this one was somewhat different in that rather than the bear looking after the child, the bear seemed to likely have an alternative motive. So I then found this statement written in Toms River, New Jersey Courier on the 16th of June 1886. A Montana girl has been kidnapped by a bear. She probably got one hug from the animal and followed it off. There's absolutely no follow-up to that, by the way, which was just absolutely amazing. And somehow that's just the end of the story. After that though, I found the disappearance of a girl called Alice Rachel Peck, and this was reported by the Gettysburg Star and Sentinel on the 6th of September 1898. Alice Peck of Burns Valley became lost in the mountains August 25th and was found 3 days later uninjured. A few berries had been the 3-year-old child's diet for that length of time. Her escape from snakes and wild animals was miraculous. There was a further elaboration of this event that took a really strange turn, but unfortunately I can't quite make out which newspaper reported this, only that I think it came from the Bucks County Gazette, a short period of time after the Gettysburg Star, when more details became apparent. Here's what was reported. Aged 3 years and 4 months, wandered away from her home in Burns Valley Thursday, August 25th, in search for her mother, who went on an errand. The little girl travelled an old and unused bark road, climbed over a high and very rough mountain, and there, worn out with hunger and without her bonnet or shoes, for 3 days and nights had nothing to eat but a few huckleberries, while friends and neighbours were diligently searching for her or her remains. She was found on Sunday morning, August 28th at 11:30 by William Bear, sound and well. She neither smiled or cried as the 200 voices rang out the glad tidings of great joy, 5 miles from home in the mountains. While her parents were in great agony at home, they were soon relieved when hearing the many voices and trumpets proclaiming that the lost had been found. You might think it sounds weird that this 3-year-old made it over a mountain by herself, and when asked how she got over those big rocks, she said, "The big black man helped me." It's worth saying that it looks like the people there didn't take that literally, and they actually thought that she was referring to a black bear. She was also uninjured, so if it was a person, I'm not sure what the motives were since nothing actually happened. But either way, I can only imagine how creepy that must have sounded when she told her mother. So let's have a look at another one, and this one was reported on the 8th of June 1888 by the Brewster Standard. This is what was said. It hardly seems creditable that a child should meet with a wild bear in the woods, nestle close to its warm robe of fur, and sleep all night with the bear and not be harmed at all. Yet this is the latest story from Ulster County. On Wednesday afternoon, a 2.5-year-old daughter of Millard Davis of Boyceville in the Catskill Mountains disappeared and no trace of her could be found, despite searching parties being out all night. On Thursday, a man who was fishing for trout discovered the little girl standing in the middle of a brook that runs through a deep ravine between 2 mountains. She had wandered over 2 miles from her home. The parents were overjoyed in recovering their little one, and now comes the strange part of the incident, or let's get bizarre, as I like to say. The little girl has never been known to tell stories and is in fact too young and innocent to practice deceit. But when her father asked her where she had slept all night, the little one answered, "In the woods with the big bear, Papa." She was closely questioned, but the child adhered to her story that she had slept with a bear in the woods. And the people in Boyceville believed that the little girl really did meet with a bear, and not knowing what it was, went up to it, and for some reason the beast refrained from hurting the wanderer. There are other people who believe that the bear came out of the mountains to the vicinity of Mr. Davis's house, and the child, after seeing the shabby brute, ran after it and followed it to the ravine. That one actually sounds a lot like Casey, and it's just a shame that there were any follow-up reports of that, or at least that I could find. We're quite spoiled these days because you can often come across a wealth of information on any event that's taken place, but back then it was a bit different. It's obviously made a lot easier now with the advent of the internet, whereas back then they just didn't have anything like that. Now, the final disappearance I came across was that of Ida Mare Curtis, and this was reported by the Provo Daily Herald on the 5th of July in 1955. This is what they had to say. The mother of 2-year-old Ida Mare Curtis insisted today that a bear took the little girl found unharmed near a lumber camp in the wild Kootenai National Forest by a search party. The searchers found Ida Mare on Monday in a small hole only 300 yards away from the camp where Mrs. Curtis said the bear, possibly a grizzly, grabbed the baby Saturday night. The child was taken to a Libby hospital. A physician said that she suffered only minor cuts and bruises after a 21-hour exposure in the wilds of northwest Montana. Mrs. Curtis thanked God and sobbed when she learned that her daughter was found. Her father said that he had given up any hope of ever seeing the little girl alive again. Some of the 350 men who took part in the night-long search for Ida Mare expressed skepticism that she had really been carried off by a bear. One of these was Lincoln County Sheriff Ray Frost, who said a bear might have frightened the child and caused her to run away. Mr. and Mrs. Curtis were staying at the lumber camp with their 8 children. The father, 49, is a woodworker. On Saturday night, 2 of the older children said that they saw a bear enter the family tent. They ran down the road to tell their mother. Their father was working in the woods a short distance away. Mrs. Curtis said that she returned in time to see a huge bear holding the child in its front paw, running on 3 legs into the thicket. She said that she didn't have the slightest idea of what a bear really looked like, but the description she gave tallied with that of a grizzly. Hysterical, she tried to follow, but officials at the logging camp prevented her. They began immediately to organise a search. Ida Mae's father worked through the night and day without a rest in the search line. Mrs. Curtis said that she was frantic to take part, but she didn't want to leave her other 7 children alone. A search party led by Kenneth Niels of Libby found the girl as they were showing a pilot where to look for her. He and his party, armed, signalled to the others that the search was at an end. It's interesting again that no one actually saw the bear other than the kids and the mother, who had no idea what a bear looked like. Apart from Ida, while researching her disappearance, I came across a mention of a girl called Katie Flynn on Reddit, and her disappearance seems to have been popularised by David from Can I'm Missing, who actually released a video not too long ago on her disappearance. But unfortunately, I just couldn't find any original article that mentioned her. So without that reference material, I can't really cover it, because without the original articles, what tends to happen is that you end up playing Chinese whispers. If you see what I'm saying. But if you do know of the original articles, then do let me know, because I'd love to have a read through it. With all of that being said though, there does seem to be some historical basis of bears, I assume, taking and then caring for kids. And that is so weird. It's just odd that bear experts don't believe that this would ever be the case. What do you make of that? I'm excited to read the comments on this one, so do share your thoughts. Other than all of that though, I'd just like to say thank you for watching, and do leave a like if you enjoyed the video, or a dislike if you didn't. And I'd just like to say a massive thank you to the patrons, because I would have a much harder time doing this without your support, so thank you very much. But other than that, I hope that you've had a good day, or evening depending on where you are, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.